Joining us now on the program are a father and son pair, Dave and Reggie, whose success story with the Rose Hill Center is the reason we were able to have this interview today. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining the program.
Thank you, Tyler.
Appreciate having the both of you on. So, Dave, can you talk about how this journey began in yours and Reggie's battle with mental illness? Reggie's battle with mental illness, and now how you, as his father, and him as your son, both came to what ended up happening to get him treated for his mental illness.
Well, thanks, first of all, for having us. Reggie's situation started when he was a freshman at Michigan and studying engineering in 1998. And after his second semester, while on a job training, I should say, I believe, Reg, you interject correct me if I got this wrong, Reg, but he had his initial episode at age 19, 20 maybe.
19.
19 was it, Reg?
Yeah.
And his initial episode, and we got a call at 4 a.m. that from Nashville, Tennessee. Is that where it was, Reg? Nashville, I think.
Yep, that's where I was being trained to work for my new job. Yeah.
And it was a summer job, if I recall, but that he had an incident, was in the hospital. So I immediately caught a flight that early the next morning, or that same morning, about 2 hours later, arrived down there around 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, and got him to the hospital, and met him at the hospital and met with the doctors and discovered that he had a psychotic episode, and that's about all they knew at the time. And we stayed here a couple of days, had the doctors treat him, gave him some medication to balance things, and to the point where a couple of days later we were able to drive back to Michigan, where we had him contact a local psychiatrist that we'd been referred to by our doctor. And then the process started from that point on, and some 20-some years later, we're in a much better state, right, Reg?
Absolutely.
And so, Reggie, for you, do you have any recollection of that time and that moment in your life? Because as your father had described it, it seems like this was the first of any kind of an episode of this kind that you had ever had. So do you have any recollection of that moment?
Yeah, it was a pretty scary moment. I pretty much had like a lot of racing thoughts, and it was hard for me to control my mind at the time. And so I ended up in the hospital and very confused at the time, and was trying to just do the best I could. And so I stayed a couple nights at this psychiatric hospital down in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was there a couple nights, and they sent me back up to Michigan with Dad. But they put me on some medications and everything like that. And like Dad said, I had to see a psychiatrist. From there on, it was a slow process, but thankfully for Rose Hill Center, I was able to get back on track. It took a long time, but I'm here today, and I do remember the incident very well, pretty much every detail of it. But yeah, it was a difficult situation.
So we've had the Rose Hill Center, we've had a couple of officials at different times on this program before, so we have an extensive catalog of information on the services that are provided there for those of you in the audience that would like to learn more about this organization and the help that it provides to those seeking mental health treatment of a variety of different forms by going to our website. That's civiccentertv.com/megacast. Just search for Rose Hill Center. But Reggie, in your case, Can you give us a walkthrough of what it was like to go to the Rose Hill Center for that treatment and how that specialized treatment that they had provided to you for your situation and your mental health has helped you in your recovery?
Yeah, I mean, it helped absolutely amazingly. Like I said, it was a slow process, but I was there as a resident, and they slowly got me on different medications and trying to find a good concoction of medicines that would work together to benefit my mental health. So I stayed in the residence there for about, I forget how long I was there, maybe over a year maybe. But it was a struggle, but I got through it, and I made some friends in the process there at Rose Hill, because a lot of the other people were in the same boat that I was in. But I will be honest, I didn't want to be there at first. I didn't even want to be on my medication. I didn't want to be at Rose Hill, but looking back on it, Rose Hill was the place that pretty much saved my life.
And looking back on it too, was it hard for you, and you've kind of discussed this already, for you, just as you were in that moment and the life that you had lived up until that point, to come to terms with the fact that you had a mental health condition that you couldn't control and you needed help to get control with? Was that hard for you?
Yes, it was. I mean, I had to ask for help, and I knew I wanted to see if I could figure it out on my own, but there was no way. I needed the help of the professionals, and so I needed the help of my nurses and the caregivers there at Rose Hill, as well as the psychiatrist. So there's no possible way I could have done this all on my own.
We're joined by Reggie and Dave. They are a son and a father pair joining us on the Megacast. Reggie had previously undergone treatment for mental illness at the Rose Hill Center, which is a mental health facility providing specialized mental health care to a variety of patients. You can find more information on them by going to our website at civiccentertv.com/megacast and just searching on our on-demand page for Rose Hill Center. We have a couple of interviews that are pretty extensive, going over the services that they provide and how you can get access to those services. But as we talk about access, let's take a step back. And Dave, for you, at the initial point of Reggie's diagnosis, or after the initial episode, and as you and Reggie are seeking treatment for him, can you talk about how insurance coverage at that time, and even as it may translate to now, how the limitations in that coverage affected initially getting Reggie the help that he needed with this new normal in his life, given that diagnosis?
Well, indeed, insurance was a challenge. At the time, right now I'm retired and I'm on Medicare, but before that, Reggie was still under age 26, so he was under my insurance with my employer. And it was Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And the hospitalization was covered, except for some co-pays and things like that for the most part. But after the hospitalization, and Reggie returned to a hospital here in Michigan as well after the Nashville stint for a week or two, while his doctor was able to treat him there in the hospital. But after the hospital stay of 10 days, I believe, the insurance basically dropped off. And he came home, and there was no need for insurance at that point in time, but they did cover his psychiatric treatments and his medication. But then when we eventually discovered Rose Hill and he started residing there, that's when the insurance issues surfaced. That was about even before he turned 26, when he dropped off my insurance. They wouldn't cover those sort of residential treatment situations. The transition between living in the community and leaving a hospital, that gap in there was very difficult, and they would not cover that. And obviously we fortunately had the financial resources to be able to manage it, but not without stress, of course. But it was definitely worth it, no doubt about that. We'd do it all over again if we had to, but the insurance was a problem indeed.
And luckily, and thankfully nowadays, insurance companies seem to be somewhat, at least, more perceptive of the necessity of mental health care in a full health care plan and in full health care coverage. But certainly, even just in the last few years, that was not the case. And so that can cause, as you said, great stresses on the family, most primarily because you want your loved one to get the treatment that they need. They have a mental illness that's like any other illness. If you don't treat it, it can only do more harm. But at the same time, it still puts financial stress on families too. But just in general, the stress. Talk about the stresses of managing your son's healthcare coverage as a parent and as a very concerned parent at that time, given that situation and the lack thereof of proper coverage, generally speaking, throughout every insurance, including yours, for mental health care. What kind of toll did that take on your entire family?
Well, it was obviously stressful. However, I always like to do something about a problem like this. So one of the things that I was able to do was join the board at the invitation of the founders, Dan and Rosemary Kelly, join the Rose Hill board, where we could start working on some of these problem areas, working with the insurance companies and so forth. And I wouldn't say it's 100% successful, but things have improved. And we also established a financial aid process. And we we also expanded our donor base so that we can get contributions from donors that can be applied to financial aid for those that cannot afford the full cost of the residential treatment system at Rose Hill. So that is, and I think there's a relatively large percentage of residents now that do get financial aid, and thanks to the endowment that they've created from that campaign. Insurance is still of a challenge, though, and there's work that has to be done in that regard, and it's the coverage is limited to maybe 30 days to maybe 3 months at most, not a year like it took Reggie, so you still are oppressed financially.
We're joined by Dave and Reggie, a father-son pair, who are speaking about the treatment that Reggie had received from the Rose Hill Center, which is located in Holly, Michigan. More information can be found about the Rose Hill Center. It is a mental health treatment facility. Can be found on their website, rosehillcenter.org. That's rosehillcenter.org for more information. So Reggie, after undergoing your treatment at the Rose Hill Center and creating what is that new normal for you in your life and as you're living with your mental health condition, what's your status now? How have you been feeling in the years since your exit from the Rose Hill Center, and how has the treatment that you underwent there and what you learned under that treatment in terms of managing your mental illness, how has that ultimately brought you to your situation today, and how are you feeling?
Well, today I feel probably 90% better. Obviously, I'm not 100% because there's no cure for this as of now, but I am on the right medications, and I'm very diligent about taking my medication every day. I take quite a few different types of medicines, but I take them in the morning and then throughout the day and at night as well. So it's a daily thing for me, to kind of a routine for me to do now. But thankfully the medicine has improved, and also I've been seeing a therapist and also my psychiatrist. So we're all working together, and I also have some very, very close friends that I've made at Rose Hill, and we support each other as well, and I'd also like to say thanks to my mom and dad, because they've always had my back, and they did whatever they could to make my situation more positive.
Reggie, do you have any advice for others that may undergo mental health treatment or go through mental health treatment programs, even if it's just as simple as seeking the counseling of a therapist or another professional, and what they should, advice for what they should be ready for, should prepare for, or just in maintaining those programs and working with those programs to get the treatment that they need?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing is just to stay on your medication. I'll be honest, at first when they put me on medicine, I did not want to be on that medicine. I guess I was just trying to cope with my illness at the time. It was very difficult and confusing for me. But over time, I began to learn better, and I knew a lot of people were rooting for me, especially my friends and family. So my advice would just to stay on your medication and listen to the psychiatrist, and try and just do your best and don't give up, and things will get better over time. Yeah.
And then Dave, for you, do you have any advice for parents out there whose children may be going through some mental health issues? They may suspect that their kid has some mental health issues, or it may be formally diagnosed. Any advice for parents and families as they help their children undergo this time in their life?
Well, obviously, get medical help, and don't be afraid to try different medications, because there were probably a dozen or more that Reggie tried before he got under the system he's on now. His diagnosis was schizoaffective disorder, and the last medication he tried was the one that worked the best. It was called Clozaril, and it was the last one we tried because it required a monthly blood test, because it has some side effects on 5% of the takers. Fortunately, Reggie's never had a problem. But that medication was the secret for Reggie's situation. Not everyone, obviously, but he had, with his diagnosis, was a good one. And so just keep trying different things. And the psychoeducation is important too, through a therapist, where you're educated on the basics on not only just taking medications, but also coping factors. Reggie's amazing at how he deals with various circumstances, that the stress that comes up, and avoiding stress would be another big one that he does. Reggie works about 30 hours a week in the home health care business, and we're very proud of the fact that he's there, and he got his degree as well. But it took some time, and as he got through this process, and we're very proud of him. And what he's gone through was 10 times more stressful and challenging than I ever went through in my career, and it was just in the business world. So we admire him for his fortitude and strength, and we love him to death, obviously.
Reggie, we're glad you're well. We thank you for joining us and telling us your story, and Dave, yours as well. We appreciate both of you for coming on today.
Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely.